First, I want to welcome everybody. Thank you to Debbie Friedstrom for allowing me to hijack the Township Association meeting. I do want to thank our sponsors tonight. Without them, we could not have done this. We are very thankful to the Township Trustee Association, A-Tech, for providing not only audio, video, but a venue as well, and the Gazette newspapers, not only for being here to cover, but they have provided dinner tonight. So we are greatly appreciative to them and to the Ashtabula County Commissioners for putting this on tonight. We have some representatives from Congressman Joyce's office, from Senator Portman's office, as well as Secretary of State John Huston's office here tonight. We have many local officials here. I'm not going to introduce everybody because I'd have to introduce every single one of you. So we're going to pass on that tonight and get started. The biggest question is, why did we do this? I wanted to show where we started when the epidemic became a health crisis, where we are today, and how we are addressing the epidemic. Where do opportunities exist for future projects? You will hear from our panel of community and state leaders on what they are doing to tackle the drug epidemic. Our panelists today are Judge Gary Yost, Judge Albert Camplese, Sheriff William Johnson, Prosecutor Nick Iarocci, Representative Robert Sprague, Kaitie Park. In place of Dr. Brockett is Paul Brockett. We have Greg Myers from Growth Partnership, Craig Cernick from Job and Family Services, and Ohio Means Jobs. So welcome. I appreciate you guys being here. We're going to give you about 4 to 5 minutes to talk about your topics, and we're going to start with Greg Leonard, who represents TAG.
Good evening. Hopefully you can hear me. Like Commissioner Whittington said, I am the Assistant Commander of the TAG Drug Task Force. I'm just going to give a brief view of what we're seeing as far as what we're buying on the street, what we're seeing on the street. Primarily right now, the drugs we're seeing the most of are methamphetamine, heroin, and other opiates, and crack cocaine. Crack cocaine in the last several months has made a huge comeback into the area. We talk about the heroin. Heroin is what everybody hears about. But really right now, heroin, not only in Ashtabula County, but throughout the country, heroin to an extent is becoming extinct. And it's being rubbed out basically by fentanyl, carfentanil type drugs. When we go out to buy heroin out on the streets, when we're getting our labs back, most of the time there isn't any heroin in it at all. It's fentanyl. So it's made a big transition. Probably 4 or 5 years ago, heroin was going for about $200 a gram. And you think of a sugar packet as a gram on the streets of Ashtabula County. And it went down to about $80 a gram since that time over the last 4 years. Now it is going back up to about $120 a gram, because actually when we're looking at it, you can almost tell we just bought heroin in the last couple days, or what was supposed to be heroin, and it was pure white. And most of the time that's actually not going to be heroin. It's going to be, when we get our labs back, it's going to end up being fentanyl. Next probably is methamphetamine. And you know, Ashtabula County has always been, since methamphetamine came out, Ashtabula County has been known in the state of Ohio as a county that there's methamphetamine everywhere. Okay, we were probably paying about $100 a gram on the streets of Ashtabula County for methamphetamine. That's methamphetamine that is being created and made here. Here, the methamphetamine here in Ashtabula County has been cut by 3/4. And the reason that is that, like I said, in May of last year, we started seeing an onslaught of methamphetamine that's coming from our southwest border. It's coming through the southwest border, clear across the country into Chicago, Detroit, into Cleveland, Painesville, and making it into Ashtabula County. Now you think about, we are paying $100 a gram for methamphetamine made in Ashtabula County, created right here, don't have to travel anywhere. We were buying methamphetamine from out of the area, from the southwest border, for $40 a gram. So that's why you're seeing our meth labs cut drastically like they are. Why would you have to go out and steal anhydrous and go get Sudafed pills when you can buy methamphetamine for less than half the price? So that tells you how much methamphetamine is in our county. Our county, even when you compare it to Trumbull County, we have a lot more even of that. Trumbull County has always been a little bit behind us when it's come to methamphetamine. Even when it was the meth labs, when we used to have meth labs down in Trumbull County, unfortunately, it was people from Ashtabula County that moved down there and were teaching people how to make meth. But again, even with the crystal methamphetamine that is being brought here, Trumbull County even is lagging a little bit behind us. So, and I spoke about crack cocaine. You know, probably 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we barely ever made a purchase of crack cocaine, and it is making a strong comeback. We've had dozens of cases over the last 2 years of people now selling crack cocaine, because one reason that is, and it's a lot of the people that were dealing heroin out there have offshot and they're dealing methamphetamine, or they've gone to dealing crack cocaine. And one of the reasons that is because Mr. Iarocci has done such a good job of prosecuting people who are supplying people with drugs that overdose and die. That has made an effect on the street. People have gone away from just dealing heroin, because they can make bigger profit or as much profit selling methamphetamine or crack cocaine as you can, and don't have the risk of dealing heroin or other opiates. So that's that, and the opiate task force has helped do the groundwork for those prosecutions, so that's been very important. So anyway, I only had 3 to 5 minutes, so I'll be here for if anybody has any questions afterward. One thing I will say is, and I was talking to the sheriff, one thing that really has handicapped us is that we, to an extent, due to changes by the state, unfunded mandates by the state, we don't have a criminal deterrent when it comes to a jail. And it's hard to do this job when you can't put people in jail that need to go to jail. We just don't have the availability here. So that gets out on the street. I bet you 70 to 80% of the people that we're buying drugs off in Ashtabula County are from Cuyahoga County. They don't come here to see the covered bridges. They come here because they see, what are they going to do to me? That reputation spreads fast. So somebody said to me earlier, we could build a jail twice the size and we'll fill it up. Yes, but we also have options. So we just can't, we cannot survive. It's either you want to enforce drug laws or you don't want to enforce drug laws. But we cannot continue to do what we're doing. We can indict 15 or 20 people, and when we don't have the people to go out and serve those indictments, and the people are still out there selling drugs. So the issue with the jail is something that has to be resolved when it comes to drug enforcement. And with that being said, that same jail also has to have, and this is something where the state of Ohio needs to start looking at not just shirking responsibility, but helping with the responsibility with rehabilitation. That when people get put into the county jail, there needs to be more options for those people to get help while they're there. Because sometimes being put in the county jail is the only thing that's going to save that person's life. So with that, thank you all. Thank you for your attention.
Next, I'd like to introduce our Sheriff, William Johnson.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. I have to ditto a lot of things that Greg Leonard said. Greg's been with me, and we've been together for quite a few years. But I'd like to start out by saying that I look back when I was a deputy and Greg was a deputy and how things have changed. And believe it or not, it's not even close to being the same job. And one of the big reasons it's not the same job is it's real simple. It's the illegal drugs that have really taken over not only our county but the world. It's just a different way that we have to handle calls now. I don't want to alarm anybody here, but I would say on every shift and every call that we go to, a good 98% of them are drug related. The fight is on when we go. We just last night, it's almost every night, guys get injured. They're always putting their lives on the line, and it's simply because of the illegal drug activity. You know, I am going to tell you, though, we are making a difference, believe it or not. We just have so many on a day-to-day basis of these particular calls. And make no mistake about it, it's all walk of life. It affects everybody. It affects everybody in this room that's not on drugs. But I am going to tell you, it ranges from 60, 70, 50, 40, 30, 20, teens. That's how it works. And whenever you look in the obituary and you see a sudden death, you can almost bet that it was probably from drugs, especially when they're a very young age. They don't give any details, but that's what happens. And the fentanyl that's around and the drugs that we're dealing with on an everyday basis is very, very dangerous. I'll give you a good example. We had an officer that collapsed and actually stopped breathing about maybe a month ago from car fentanyl. Maybe it, you know, when he handled it, but he did get a little whiff of it. He went down, and Narcan brought him back. He does not do drugs. He was checked. But that's just how dangerous this is that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. But we've been working hand in hand not only with TAG, and we have DEA. We work with the U.S. Marshals. All the other departments, we're working together to try to reduce the number of drug activities that are happening within the county. We know, we get calls every day, and we share them with our undercover people about what we're doing. People see cars pulling in and out, and they're leaving, and they know they don't work, they don't have jobs. We know they're on drugs. In fact, to be honest with you, working on cases like this, sometimes it might be us that are pulling in that driveway. Not in marked units, not in uniforms, but working the drug activity so we can reduce it and help people out. So I'd also like to say that Greg is spot on when it comes to this, where everybody needs to understand. The people that we are arresting now, and because our jail has become mainly felony jail, we don't have any room for misdemeanors. I'll just briefly talk about issue 1. It needs to go down. All the state wants to do is put the burden on the counties. We have 170 in our jail, and it's supposed to hold 112. Probably 95% or better are felonies because they put the 4th and 5th degree felony. The state of Ohio, without giving us any money for this, unfunded mandates, have put the burden on the counties because they found out it's pretty expensive to have them in prison. Well, unfortunately, we don't have the room. Our jail is outdated. It needs to change. When you arrest people today and you tell them you're going to charge them, just charge them, not even convicted yet, with a felony, they don't care. They don't want to work anyway because they'd rather do the drugs. They have actually more money in their pockets than people that work hard every single day. So there's no deterrent, on top of the fact they know they're not going to go to jail because there's no room. And I'll put this to rest real quick. It's not, I'll arrest them, but the sheriff won't take them. I have obligations. We have to protect the county. I have to protect myself because we're under minimum standards. We're way overbooked already. So the jail is a hot item. You're going to be looking at it. It's something that needs to be done, along with the activity that we're going to have to do in regards to reducing the drug activity in the county. I want to end with just a little stat for 2018. When we talk about indictments, fifth-degree felonies, we had 82 indictments so far this year. In felony 4s, we had 146 indictments. Felony 3s, 43. F2s, felony 2s, we've had 3. Felony 1s, we've had 4. And we've made other arrests. We have a lot more than Trumbull County. And I want you to know that Trumbull County is probably 250 to 275,000 people. Ashtabula County is maybe 103. So when you take a look at, there is a lot of activity going down and there's a lot of hard work going on. But make no mistake about it, we got a ways to go. We work hard. We need your help as well by giving us the information. We'll work them particular areas and try to give as much assistance as we can. When you call, you don't have to give your name. You give the information. We'll put somebody on it, take a look at it. But there are chances that we already know. We've been there. We might even be there when you're calling. So the activity is really heavy. Hopefully we can keep everybody healthy, keep everybody working together, work with all these other departments is essential in this drug activity in this county. Because, and we're not alone. We're talking because we're in Ashtabula County. Believe me, all counties have their problems. But we have to worry about ourselves and we have to make it safer in the neighborhood. Down with issue 1. We got to get a jail and we'll work hard. We need everybody's information and help. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to welcome our County Prosecutor, Nick Iarocci.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. People who are addicts prioritize their addiction above everything else. They steal money and property from family, relatives, friends, and relatives of friends. They steal money and property from people when they are not looking, and they break into houses or shoplift property from retail stores and then pawn the property off for money. They take money and buy heroin or opiates. And not only is trafficking, possessing, and using opioids, heroin, and other drugs a crime, the thefts, the burglaries, and robberies that occur result in more crime. And it leads to other crimes, such as illegal gun possession, domestic violence, assault, sexual assaults especially have peaked in our county, and even prostitution. One local drug law enforcement agent who's in this room has opined that every young woman who is addicted to heroin is also prostituting herself in exchange for supplying her heroin addiction. The criminal justice system has become inundated with opiate drug cases, and it is creating a staggering burden on county resources. Prior to the opiate epidemic, prosecutors were tough on crime. It was our job to make sure that everyone who committed a crime went to prison. Things have changed dramatically, not just in this county, but amongst most prosecutors that I talk to. But with the opiate epidemic, we still have victims. And victims are usually families of those whose family member has died of an overdose. So what do I do as a prosecutor? How am I supposed to be tough on crime yet, I don't know, sympathetic to the person who perhaps supplied the drugs to that person who died because they themselves are users and addicts? It's a real dilemma. But I have taken the position that I need to be sympathetic to that family member who lost a loved one. And as overdose deaths mount, Prosecutors, like myself, are increasingly treating those deaths as homicides. And we are looking to hold someone criminally accountable. In 2016 and 17, my office has indicted 7 people for supplying those who have died of overdoses with involuntary manslaughter. Those same seven persons have been convicted. 6 of them as pleas, 1 of them after a jury trial, which was the most interesting trial that I have personally held. But 7 of those are now serving sentences between 10 years, the maximum, down to 4 years. And all of them were addicts. All of them themselves who are serving time for supplying the drugs to those who have died were users. And it's those family members of the loved ones who were lost that look to me in my office with a bit of appreciation. But the frustrating thing on my end is that not all of those families who've lost loved ones are receiving the same justice. Because these crimes, if you want to call them that, because I'm calling them that, but I'm getting blamed by those who feel like I shouldn't be prosecuting users for supplying those with drugs that lead to their death, that I shouldn't be prosecuting them, but it's those people, those family members who lost loved ones and whose cases were not able to be investigated and prosecuted are looking to me and pounding the table and wondering why. Why did you prosecute, were you able to prosecute that person and not the one who supplied my family member with the drugs that led to their death? It's a dilemma that is not only facing me in my office, but across the country. In 15 states where data was available, the New York Times found that more than 1,000 prosecutions or arrests in accidental overdose deaths since 2015 were made and done. Between 2015 and 17, the number of cases nearly doubled. Dozens more cases were documented in news reports, and in all, overdose prosecutions were found in 36 states, with charges ranging from involuntary manslaughter to first-degree murder. The best I can do in Ohio is a manslaughter charge, where the maximum someone can receive is 11 years for supplying or distributing the drugs that leads to someone's death. This is a dilemma that me and my assistants face every day. How do we prosecute someone? How do we hold someone responsible for another's death when they themselves are addicts? And it's a dilemma that I continue to deal with each and every day, and I lose sleep over it. But I have taken the position, I will continue to take the position, that if our incredible overdose task force continues to do the fine work that they do and present evidence to my office that someone has supplied another with drugs that led to their death, that my office will continue to aggressively prosecute that person and seek the maximum penalty that's available. I continue to work hard for you and for this community to keep the public safe from these crimes that are being committed by addicts. But I ask for your prayers, because this is not an easy job. And it's a dilemma that not only me and the prosecutor's office face, but all of law enforcement and the court system has to deal with on a daily basis. Thank you.
It's amazing to work on the complex and know what our sheriff does, what TAG does, what our prosecutor does. It's another thing to sit in an audience and listen to the statistics and to what they deal with every day. it's tough. When we talk about this drug addiction, we're talking about people who we all know someone who's been affected. We all know that, our prosecutor is prosecuting somebody's child, somebody's brother or sister. So thank you for doing the job you do. And of course, prayers as we fight this epidemic. Next, I'd like to introduce our juvenile court judge, Judge Albert Camplese.
Well, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I welcome really any opportunity to engage in what I would call outreach in an effort to kind of sensitize, or if I may be presumptuous, educate persons such as yourselves as to what some of the issues are. Now, I've been asked to kind of define the problem, I guess, from my perch as the juvenile judge of the county, but I'm also going to point out I'm the probate judge of the county. So I'll be digressing a bit into that area. And prior to my life as a juvenile judge, I was a municipal court judge for 22 years. And prior to that, I was a prosecutor. So I've in total put about 33 years into this. Gone through the period where marijuana was a problem, then crack cocaine, or powdered cocaine was a problem, then crack cocaine. What are we going to do? Crack babies will never survive this, but we found our solutions. Then meth became a major problem, and we were destroying whole houses when a meth lab would blow up and it would be declared a hazardous waste site. How are we going to ever solve this problem? We've, in large part, due to the work of groups like TAG and the efforts of law enforcement, we've conquered that. Heroin, quite frankly, is the worst thing that we've ever seen. Fentanyl and carfentanil and the problems it brings are just daunting, to say the least. So I'm going to begin by defining the problem, and I'm going to first observe, as a municipal court judge, in large measure, the middle layer of our justice system is ill-equipped to deal with the types of problems that we're having right now. And I say that because our justice system in Ohio, unlike some states, is funded at the local level, and we do not have a centralized justice system in Ohio. And when we make a change in the law, such as we did in 1996, where we took low-grade felons out of the prison system and we housed them in the county jail because they need to be treated locally, what we in effect did is we commandeered a local resource, paid for with local taxpayer dollars, and it's now being used as a state resource. As a municipal court judge, if I gave you a 3-day sentence today, chances are you wouldn't serve that for 2.5 to 3 years. It wasn't my intention in giving you the 3 days today to have you serve it 3 years from now. So I say this because this problem is very complex, and there's a systemic aspect to this problem that involves enabling our middle layer of our justice system, the area that I left, the muni court level, the county court level, to deal effectively with the problem. There's ongoing discussions at the county level concerning a new jail. I'd ask that you pay close attention, but there's going to be an emphasis on treatment, because why? The nature of the problem that criminal justice deals with these days is different. In the old days, the nostalgic days where we wax nostalgic for the old days of crime, it's when people intentionally balled their fist up and punched somebody in the face. That's an intentional act. Or just because they wanted to break into your house, they broke into your house. Today, that behavior is driven by a different consideration. The drug, as Prosecutor Iarocci alluded to, is taken over every aspect of that person's life. So in a sense, our justice system is tasked not with dealing with the traditional criminogenic problem, but we're dealing with a problem that's driven by a substance. And essentially, we have a square peg solution, which is our criminal justice system, and we're trying to jam a round peg into that square peg hole. And as a consequence, we are evolving. And one of the ways that we've evolved is you would not have heard Greg Leonard or Prosecutor Iarocci come up here and express empathy or being conflicted as to what we should be doing about people who are committing crime. Why do they have that attitude? Because they recognize there's something other than just simply a bad mindset, or what we used to call a perverse mindset, that is driving that behavior, that is, causing people to break into your homes and take your stuff, or injure your family in some fashion, either directly or indirectly. Today, disease is the issue, and I've always regarded myself in doing my job as being very apolitical. And what I mean by that is, if society says we lock everybody up, as a judge, I'm really fine with that. Why? Because society decided that. But in doing the job at all levels that I've done it at, I know that you don't mean that. And when I say that, I'm saying that the moment you give me permission to lock someone up is the moment in this economy that you give me permission to spend your money for the rest of your natural life on the natural life, the rest of that person's natural life. Because you know what? Nobody hires criminals. The economy just simply, there's too many people that are able to work. There's felons out there, they don't get hired, so they have two choices: continue the crime or go on a public system of welfare. So right now, the task that we have in our justice system, because it's impacting families, and I'm going to bore down now to the families. When we came into the juvenile system, we've experienced 2 straight years, their first 2 years, of 300% caseload increases, all fueled by the drug problem. We have a main category of cases called abuse, neglect, dependency. We were averaging around 325 cases a year. We did 51 permanent custody matters last year. A permanent custody case in the juvenile realm is equivalent to a death penalty case. Why? Because you're taking a person's child from them, and there are constitutional safeguards. And when we do those decisions, there's a whole host of checklists that we have to go down and make specific findings in specific areas as to why there's no other choice but to remove that child from the parent. That's a very labor-intensive process. We did 51. Now, to contrast that, Lake County to our west did 14. They have 5 magistrates. They have a full-time dedicated juvenile judge. We did 325 abuse, neglect, dependency cases. They did 114. So it is a resource issue that as well. And as a consequence, we've had to kind of realign our resources in our juvenile justice system. But it is affecting parents. Parents are, in effect, prioritizing the drug because of the biological drive. Their children are no longer a priority. Our system has to be there to catch that child, to at least give the child a chance. To a lesser extent, I'm happy to say, we do not have a significant juvenile drug problem. At least we've not seen it in our juvenile system. So the kids, I think, are getting the message. They're hearing what Greg Leonard and Prosecutor Iarocci is doing, and they're paying attention. They know what's going on, and they sense or know directly what's going on with their parents. So right now, I'm very excited about our juvenile level because we are developing systems to address this. Grandparents are being called upon to come in and take custody of their children. And as a consequence, it's taxing their resources and the resources of their household, where they thought at this stage of life they're going to be enjoying retirement. They're not. They're raising their grandchildren. In my probate capacity, one of the interesting things is in estates, a child years ago was named the executor of a parent's estate. Well, many years have gone by. That parent has never went back and redone that will. You know what? That child developed a drug problem. And when that child was put in charge of as being the executor of the estate, assets start disappearing. So it's caused us to kind of reevaluate how we approach a probate case. Guardianships are very similar. If you're a guardian of your parent, and your parent has wealth and you happen to have a drug problem, you can see again the intersection of those two interests. Again, I'm trying to define some of the less obvious intersections between the drug problem and what we're facing with our justice system as well as our criminal justice system. Our current caseload is well outpacing the county to the west of us, Lake County, yet we do not have the resources of a Lake County to combat it. So going back to my comment about systemic change, there has to be some centralized administration of our justice system or some effort by the state to kind of prop up counties such as Ashtabula so that there isn't an incentive for a person from Cleveland to come to Ashtabula County because there's a 2-year wait to go to jail to do their business here in Ashtabula County. We have to be able to stop that threat or mitigate that threat on a par with our more wealthy or affluent counties. Right now, I'm pleased to say that we are not as emergency driven as we were 2.5 years ago. I was at Sam Quinones, the author of Dreamland, was at a function at Lakeside just a couple of days ago, and at that function, Taylor Cleveland of the Sheriff's Department indicated that our overdose rate this year is actually 50% of what it was last year. And each and every one of you should applaud the hard work that's being put in by law enforcement, TAG, and our prosecutor, and the entire justice system, because that's a tremendous testament to the adaptions that have been made at the law enforcement level. As a judge, we're more like social workers now. Police officers, they're more like social workers. Prosecutors have to weigh societal issues. So these are just some of the myriad issues that I wanted to throw out there in terms of trying to define the problem for you so that you have a good sense of what the scope of it is and how it kind of intersects with our funding needs as well. So thank you.
So as we can see, the drug epidemic is affecting all areas of the county. And I kind of would like to shift now into economic development. I'd like to introduce Greg Myers from Growth Partnership. He's the executive director.
Catherine, thank you. And just wanted to offer my thanks to the rest of the panel and to those in the audience who are involved day in and day out in addressing this issue, whether in law enforcement or on the judicial side, on the social service side, because the work that you're doing is extremely important, not only to making the quality of our life better in the county, but also to make the economic health of our county stronger. Judge Camplese, he touched on this a little bit, but I've been asked to come up and talk about the economic cost of this. And certainly the economic cost is borne by many of you as taxpayers in terms of dealing with this issue. And there is a trickle down that it has. And what I'm going to focus on mostly is the impact that it has on our business community. The irony here is that I'm probably standing on this stage today because our economic conditions are very good. Right? If we were in a weak labor environment, the businesses in our county would just be able to pass on that employee that is dealing with an addiction issue and move on. But that's not the case today, right? We're in 4.8, 4.9% unemployment. Labor is extremely tight. So what that creates is a situation in which our companies are forced more than they would be otherwise in a less tight labor market to deal with these issues. The challenge that it poses to them from an economic perspective is tremendous. The cost in terms of loss of productivity, in terms of the effort that it takes them from a human resource perspective to identify employees that aren't dealing with addiction issues, to deal with existing employees who are challenged with addiction issues and that aren't at work and aren't producing for them, that cost is tremendously high. And it also creates a situation in which they're trying to learn how to operate. Right? They've got human resource professionals who don't have experience dealing with these issues. They're now becoming social workers as well and trying to figure out how do we support these employees to make sure that we can get them healthy, back on track, and back in here being productive for us. Because we spent the time and the money to train these folks, and we have a connection with them. We want to see them get healthy, but there's a tremendous cost to them, both directly in terms of loss of productivity, but also in terms of the training that they put in, and both for themselves, for the employees, but for themselves in terms of how to deal with these issues. It requires a new way of really our companies looking at this issue. And for us, it's a matter of, for us as a community, and from an economic development perspective, we want to make sure that we're trying to touch this issue early early on. And most of that is in terms of making sure that we're touching our young people to keep them away from drugs, so that as they get through middle school, high school, and are coming into being working age, that they're not dealing with these issues directly. So there are some programs that are in place now. I think Lakeside High School and A-Tech are working on a program called Drug Free America, which is a voluntary program that students can get a card that basically says we're going to volunteer to be drug tested, and we're going to commit to living a life that is clean and free of drugs and allows us to then become a productive member of our society upon graduation. So these are things that are extremely helpful, and industry appreciates, and there's value to them in making sure that we engage in programs like that. So it's just interesting because from an economic development perspective, if we weren't in such a strong labor market, I probably wouldn't have been invited here, right? Because the discussion around that wouldn't have been so impactful in terms of the economic cost that it's having within our business community. Working on the backside, I talked about working early, but working on the backside, because we're in a tight labor market, it's a unique opportunity for us to have companies engage in creative thinking about reentry programs as well. Again, they're starving for employees, so they're more apt and more willing to talk about how do we get people back into the workforce who've been dealing with addiction issues. And now's the time to really seize that opportunity because they're open-minded, more open-minded than they would otherwise have to be in terms of figuring out how do we bring people back into the workforce to make them a competitive part and a valuable part of that labor force. So I'm gonna keep my comments fairly brief, but I did want to just talk. This does have a tremendous impact on our ability to compete. So at the Growth Partnership, our job is to try to attract new businesses in, as well as work with existing businesses to make sure that they're strong. And I'll give a couple of examples on where this touches us. So I was working with a company in South County recently that was looking at closing a facility in Texas, and we were trying to support the relocation of that operation back here. Well, in a situation like that, that company's making a decision about, do we take that operation and consolidate it or put it in another location elsewhere where we have facilities, or do we bring it back into Ashtabula County? And their experience in dealing with labor force and these issues and the challenges that we face within this labor market related to addiction influences that decision. That has a direct economic impact on all of us, because if we don't get that investment here, that's taxes that we lose out on, that's job opportunities that we lose out on, and that I'm trying to just help you understand where that connection lies. The other is that we're working now on some large investment projects to bring companies in, and this is part of the dialogue that we're having, is within your labor market, what types of challenges are you seeing related to issues of addiction? What programs are in place to help young people address these issues, deal with these issues, but also, what social service programs are in place to help others that are in the labor force today that are dealing with these issues get back into the labor force and become productive. So there's certainly a direct impact on the work that we do in terms of helping to sustain and grow our local economy as it relates to the issues of addiction. So with that, I'll leave it with that because I know we're getting short on time, and then I'll be around for questions afterwards. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Craig Cernick. He is representing Job and Family Services and Ohio Means Jobs.
Thank you, Commissioner. I don't know if it would surprise you, but our County Department of Job and Family Services and Children's Services here in Ashtabula touches 3 out of 10 of the residents year in and year out, providing them an untold number of services. Of course, what is the goal of those services? The goals of those services are to place individuals either into education or employment. And I have the benefit tonight of talking to you about one of the things that we're seeing success in, one of the programs that is helping us in this county combat the drug epidemic that we do see every day. The program I want to talk to you about is the YO program. I don't know how many by hands are familiar with the YO program. Quite a few of you. Well, the YO program has existed for 14 years. And it's done a wonderful job, but there's been dramatic changes in the last 2 years, and that's what I really want to focus on. That change has come as a result of a change in focus. Before, it was always a program focused in on helping individuals who had dropped out of school, hadn't secured their high school diploma or its equivalency, as well as some underprivileged in-school youth as well, too. But there's been a dramatic change in focus with an accompanying dramatic increase of money and resources from the state. Federal dollars known as TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Family dollars. And what we've seen and what the change in that program has been, along with those accompanying dollars, has been a change in focusing on case management, intensively working with what we're, for right now calling the lost generation, 14 to 24-year-olds, and trying to rescue them out of their situation, having numerous barriers to becoming educated and becoming employed in our community. Let's talk about the partners it's taken to build that program, because it really has taken an entire community of partners. So it starts, of course, with the County Department of Job and Family Services, who did a wonderful job in designing that program and coming up with new and revolutionary ways to think about how to do that. They've reached out and worked with Ohio Means Job Center, which is our job center that's located on Lake Avenue. And then they worked and contracted with their primary partner, which is the building where we're at right now, which is A-Tech, which I cannot sing the praises of A-Tech enough. We challenged them 2 years ago when we were looking at this program to rethink the program from A to Z, and they did that. They completely redesigned what was a successful program, keeping in mind that what we needed to tackle were these issues, the issues of drug abuse that's rampant in our community. Additional partners, Catholic Charities, who does a wonderful job working with the youth and helping them on recognizing financial literacy. When we started the program, we didn't know exactly. We knew we were going to work intensively with these youth and try to help them and remove their barriers from becoming educated or employed. We didn't know how we were going to tackle the issue of substance abuse. I can tell you that that's where LARC and community counseling came in. They stepped up using grant dollars that they had. They went out, rolled up their sleeves, got additional grants, and we now have dedicated counselors that meet day in and day out with those youth, those 14 to 24-year-olds, and are working with them to help them overcome substance abuse trauma that's in their lives. And let's talk a little bit about that. The youth that are coming into our program, 30% of them are homeless. They meet the definition of being homeless. And it's a large program that we have. We have, since January 1 of 2017, seen 650 youth come into this program. Now, some of those have exited, but most of them are still active in that program. And that's amazing when you think about that. That's about 0.5% of the population in this county is currently in or was recently in this program. And we know that this program is so important because one of the revolutions that A-Tech came up with is they recognized that this program had to be a trauma-based program. And so what they do is when these youth come in the front door, one of the first things they do is they assess them with a wonderful little one-page tool called the ACE questionnaire, which stands for Adverse Childhood Experience. And what it does is it assesses the trauma that they experience in their lives. And I'm not going to read to you all 10 questions, but if you go down through this this questionnaire, and it's available online, you'll see that almost every single one of them relates some way back to trauma that individuals would experience because either themselves or someone in their family or a parent is using or abusing narcotic drugs or alcohol. And so this trauma-based assessment, we realize, is so important. We identify the trauma in this program, we deal with it, and then the key basis of the program is to provide a supportive network. And that's what these youth are missing in their lives. These youth are in this program, they're struggling with their education, they're struggling with gaining employment because they don't have at home or elsewhere strong supportive individuals who can guide them and can provide to them the life coaching skills that they need to accomplish these simple goals. I just want to talk a little bit more quickly about the program. I know my time is limited, but we're so blessed in this program is when Yo historically existed, we had about $300,000 a year to operate that program. Well, the last 2 years, it's been injected with an additional $1.4 million using temporary assistant needy family monies, which is wonderful and great. But our director in this county, Director Patrick Arcaro, he went out this year because we had such great need and begged and borrowed and brought in another $600,000 in order to operate that program. And he did it, and we couldn't do this program without the blessing and support at every turn of our county commissioners. They have supported this program. They have helped us fight for those dollars, and we certainly appreciate it. And the last partner I need to comment on is our school districts. We have 650 kids in this program because the school districts in this community, our courts, our juvenile courts, our drug courts, at every opportunity, partners in this community have made sure that when they see a kid that's struggling, gets directed to this program. And so we certainly thank them for that. My final thought is that just a week ago, there was an article in the Columbus Dispatch. And that article focused on the fact that currently Ohio is sitting on a $500 million with a B surplus in temporary assistance for needy family dollars. That money, while the state has some designs on it, has not been pushed out. We have to insist, whoever the next governor of Ohio is, that he looks at those dollars with a focus of pushing it out to counties like ours that can certainly use it and figure out ways to put into programs like these to combat the opioid epidemic. Thank you.
Next, I would like to introduce Representative Robert Sprague. I've come to know Robert over the last couple years, and each time I see him, I learn something different that he has championed over the years in legislation regarding the drug epidemic.
Thank you so much. Again, my name is Robert Sprague. I'm from the western side of the state. I hail from Findlay, Ohio. And I'm a state representative, work in the Ohio House along with Representative Patterson. And I'm here tonight really because a constituent of mine, Tracy Morrison from Kenton, Ohio, called me up one Saturday morning on my cell phone, and I answered it. And Tracy said, "Robert," she said, "I live in Kenton, Ohio. My daughter Jenna is addicted to heroin, and so is her older sister. And her older sister had a track injury when she was 17 years old. She went to the family doctor, and he prescribed her Vicodin. And she went home and became addicted to the Vicodin, and without my knowing about it, she went back to the doctor and got repeated refills over and over and over again. To make matters worse, when Jenna, her younger sister, asked her how she was getting so thin, she gave the pills to her little sister. She said they're both now addicted to heroin. She said, my husband had a massive heart attack when he walked in on our oldest daughter when she was pregnant, injecting heroin in her bedroom. She said that Jenna had been in and out of rehab 17 different times. And she said, I've mortgaged my home to try to get my girls help. And she said, you need to do something about this. And I said, absolutely, I'll look into it down in Columbus. And she said, no. She said, you needed to do something about this. And so when I came down to the legislature in 2011, Representative Kozlowski, now Commissioner Kozlowski, we shut down the pill mills. And that was a good day for the state of Ohio. They were poisoning our state. And since then, Representative Patterson and I and my colleagues, we've done a lot of things in the state of Ohio. We've stood up over 600 recovery housing beds across the state. We've funded drug courts because they get almost 70% recovery rates in a lot of counties around the state. We've made sure the full continuum of care for treatment is available in each and every county in the state of Ohio. And we've shut down doctor shopping across the state. But despite all that progress, we spend over $1 billion a year through the Medicaid system and other treatment programs for this addiction epidemic. And one of the reasons that we spend so much money as a state, and one of the reasons that our drug problem and our crime problem is so severe, is because of the abysmally low recovery rates for those that are struggling with heroin addiction and go through treatment. You know what our statewide recovery rate is on average for heroin treatment after 1 year? 11%. Almost a 90% failure rate. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot dig our way out of a heroin epidemic with an 11% recovery rate across the state. And now we have a new problem. And the new problem is called Issue 1. It's a constitutional amendment. And I don't know about the rest of the panelists here, but I can just tell you I'm dead set against it. I've seen what this does to families. And I heard, and Greg, I'm sorry I can't remember your last name, Leonard, said there is no more heroin anymore on the streets. You can't find it. The only thing you can find now is fentanyl. We went from a prescription drug epidemic filled by the pill mills to a heroin epidemic filled by the drug cartels in Mexico, and now we have a fentanyl epidemic. And this issue, Issue 1, would put in our state's constitution, legalize the possession up to 20 grams. You could possess up to 20 grams, sorry, not legalize it, but you could possess up to 20 grams of fentanyl, and you would get charged with a minor misdemeanor, effectively a traffic ticket. I didn't know this, Greg, but you said that a gram is about 1 sugar packet? So you could have 20 sugar packets of fentanyl, enough to kill all of us in the room and another 9,000 people in the county. And you get a minor misdemeanor? Effectively a traffic ticket for that? Ladies and gentlemen, I tell you the truth, it will pour gasoline on this fire, not water. It will be absolutely dangerous for the state of Ohio. It will bring this more fentanyl into our neighborhoods and into our state, and it will kill people in the state of Ohio. That's just the facts. Now, what can we do about this? Well, one of the things we could do is we could change our low recovery rates. We can improve our treatment system. And I'm a candidate for the Ohio Treasurer of State, and I think the Treasurer can help. So I'm going to issue what's called a social impact bond in the state of Ohio to finally involve the private sector in the fight against heroin. Because the public sector, we're not going to be able to fix this on our own. We have tried. Let's involve the private sector and give them an incentive to get involved. The way the social impact bond works is going to be transformative. We're going to have the private sector issue a $1 million bond and try a new type of heroin treatment that actually gets higher recovery rates. And they run a 2-year pilot program with that new type of treatment. And we're willing to pay for 40% recovery rates. We have Ernst & Young or Deloitte or some outside accounting firm come in and they measure the results of the pilot program. They get a 40% recovery rate. State commits to buying back that bond at the end of the 2-year pilot program plus interest. So now the state's only paying for treatment that works better than what we're already paying for as a state. It will be transformative, it will save people's lives, and ultimately it'll save the state an enormous amount of money through Medicaid, through Children and Protective Services, through the criminal justice system, and through the lost opportunity cost of economic development. These are the type of real solutions that we have to bring to bear in the state of Ohio if we want to beat the heroin epidemic. And I know that If we work together, we can do it. So thank you.
So when I say the word prevention, who comes to mind? Exactly. Whenever you hear prevention in Ashtabula County, the first person everybody says is Kaitie Park. And we have been blessed to have Kaitie Park here tonight to speak with us on her prevention efforts here in Ashtabula County.
Thank you so much. So yes, I am the Ashtabula County Prevention Coalition Coordinator. About 6 years, Miriam Walton is here. She's the director of the Mental Health and Recovery Services Board. And mental health, she and Patty Wagner wrote for a drug-free communities grant that we received in October of 2014 through the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, and the Health and Human Services Administration. So the coalition had existed prior to that, but in 2015 they were able to hire a coordinator to really increase the prevention efforts throughout Ashtabula County. And in doing so, we've really been able to amp up a lot of what we do in prevention. So DFC, Drug Free Communities, believes that local problems require local solutions. And although the coalition is housed at the Mental Health and Recovery Services Board, it's a multi-agency organization that's made up of many local organizations, agencies, and individuals who want to help improve the prevention efforts countywide. So when they wrote for the Drug Free Communities grant, they had to determine 2 substances that they wanted to focus on. And at that time, they decided that they wanted to really focus efforts on underage drinking prevention and prescription medication prevention. And when I go out and speak all the time, I hear, alcohol, why alcohol? That's sissy stuff. We're past that. There's people are dying. But I will get to that in a minute. But I want to say, I say this all the time, and there's some people in this room who are probably sick of hearing me say this, but I say prevention is prevention is prevention is prevention. And what we do to prevent the misuse of substances, we're also doing to prevent mental health and suicide and bullying and violence. We're really trying to increase hope in the lives. We're trying to increase assets. So what we're doing for prevention specifically, and prevention is what I do all day long. So I, myself and Katie Morrison spoke at our PART conference last week on prevention efforts specific here in Ashtabula County for an hour and a half. So I was given 4 minutes today. So I'm just really quickly running through what we have going on. But prevention really is done at the community level. The opposite of addiction is connection. And so we really, we know that we have to assist. A big part of what the Prevention Coalition does is assist grassroots prevention efforts. We can't do this all alone. I can't do this all alone. We have one other prevention specialist in Ashtabula County. The 2 of us cannot do this all alone. It takes a community to really amp up these efforts. So assisting the grassroots organizations that are already here. My favorite example is Conneaut has Elevation Drug Awareness Program. So they take our message and share it with their community. Going back to the whole drug-free community's belief is that local problems require local solutions. I'm from Jefferson, so it's taken people from Conneaut, people in that community, listen to people in their community, and they can continue that messaging for us. Increasing assets in our youth and supporting the programs and organizations that are working with our youth. A good example of this is the after-school programming and giving kids opportunities to, kids that might not want to be involved in sports or any other extracurricular activities, finding stuff for them to do. Greg Leonard started the Kids and Cops Camp Out weekend, which is awesome to build those connections with our youth and our law enforcement. We do a lot of data collection, which every year for the grant we have to build an action plan So we're always looking, we're always doing community surveys and student surveys and key informant interviews so that we're aware of what's going on in our community. So we know where we need to focus our energy and what the issues really are and where we need to get more education out there to our communities. Reducing risks. We talk about when we're talking about prescription drug medication being a huge issue when it comes to the heroin epidemic, we have 6 drop boxes throughout Ashtabula County that we try to get people aware of so that they can get rid of unused medications. We can get those off the streets and out of the wrong hands. We talk about when it comes to alcohol, the delayed onset of use. There was a study done by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, last year that said 75% of people in treatment started using a substance before the age of 17. So when we talk about stigma, we hear all the time on social media and everywhere that this was a choice, that they chose to do these drugs. But how many of us didn't make a poor choice before the age of 17? And so we need to get this education out there. The longer we can delay that first onset of use, whether it's cigarettes, tobacco, alcohol, marijuana, whatever it is, the longer we can delay that onset of use, the less likely they are to become addicted later in life. And then reducing the stigma of addiction, getting people into treatment. One of the biggest assets that I have for prevention are people in recovery. We use them all the time to speak to our students. And it's so much more impactful when we have somebody in recovery that can tell their story than it is for me to say, just don't do it. Because they can relate better. They can say, I've sat where you sat, I know what you're going through, and they can tell their story, and kids can relate to that story as well. We have 2 of the strongest evidence-based prevention programs in our schools here in Ashtabula County. About 6 or 7 years ago, University Hospitals brought the Botman Life Skills program and partnered with the Mental Health and Recovery Services Board. So we have that in every school district. I refer to that as our modern day DARE, and I shouldn't really say that probably, but I hear all the time, if we just had DARE back in our schools, but it is a program that is for grades 3 through 12. It's supposed to be done every year. It is in every school district, and we are working on getting it in every grade level in every school district. And it works on things. It starts off at the lower grade levels on making good friends and having self-confidence, and slowly as they get older, it starts talking more about substance use and that. And then last year, through funding from the 21st Century Cures Act and our local Mental Health and Recovery Services Board, we were able to train, I think we currently have about 200 pre-K and elementary school teachers trained in the PACS Good Behavior game. And basically that equips teachers to basically teach behavior, to teach self-regulation, to improve the adaptive stress response system in the brain, basically helping the brain to develop better so that when these kids experience adversity, they can deal with it appropriately. So we are super excited about that. There's evidence that shows that 1 year of being in a PACS classroom increases graduation rates, decreases suicidal ideation, substance use. There's a whole list of things that it addresses with that. So we're very excited about that program. We're continuing to train more teachers in that. I'm like the biggest PACS fan ever. So really, I brought resources with me today. We are currently doing a community survey. If there's anybody who's interested in filling that out, I have the link with us today. But I also have cards. I send out a monthly newsletter of all things that are going on around the county in regards to prevention efforts. So if anybody wants to be on my listserv, let me know. Thank you.
So as we go through prevention, we have Paul Brockett here tonight to talk about the Drug Free America program, which you've already heard previous speakers touch on, that they are using these programs already. So welcome.
Here at A-Tech, this is actually our 4th year of offering students the opportunity to join the Drug Free Clubs of America. Drug Free Clubs of America is a national student club. Their headquarters are actually down in Cincinnati. And the way that the club works, and I go around and talk to every class about it to try and get them interested in joining. The way the club works is students join it voluntarily. And in essence, they are volunteering themselves to take a drug test. And when they pass that drug test, they are automatically members of the Drug-Free Clubs of America. And they receive a wallet card, photo ID, very similar to their driver's license, that states that they're a member of the Drug-Free Clubs of America. For the rest of the year, and it works out to be about 5 times a year, the club office in Cincinnati sends me a randomly generated list of students that are members of the club to be randomly tested that month. And those students come down and they take the test again. And as long as they pass the test, they remain members of the club. If a student ever failed one of those drug tests, I make sure the students understand a couple things. First, the results of their drug tests are never shared with the school. We never know if a student passed or failed that drug test. The only person that finds out the results of that test is their parents. When the club office in Cincinnati calls their parents, and I inform the students that if their parents were anything like mine when I was their age, I would find out that I passed that drug test when my father probably would have put my head through the wall. And I suspect many of you had similar parents. But that's the way the club works. It is students that voluntarily put themselves out there to be drug tested. And I tell the students, I try and express to the students the power of being able to go to a job interview and then the job interview present the person interviewing them with documentation that says, guess what? I have volunteered to be drug tested and here's proof that I passed that. You don't need to worry about me passing this test. And that, we are telling our students, gives our students a competitive advantage over the rest of the workforce that is out there. And we have heard over and over from our industry partners how much of a challenge it is to hire new employees that can pass a drug test as a condition of employment. So we really have used this program as a way to leverage the problem in advantage of our students to go out there. At the same point in time, a program like this, it can only be run through donations from our business partners. And the Robert Morrison Foundation has graciously, for the past couple years, funded that program almost entirely. I can tell you that when I talk to the students and I tell them the cost to join the club is $67 per student per year, I can see the eyes roll. And never mind, can't do that. There's no way I'm going to fork up $67. But when I then say the cost for A-Tech students is free because industry partners in Ashtabula County have donated their money to pay their membership dues, you can see the jaws drop down to the tables. One of the other advantages to the students in joining the club is peer pressure. All students have a circle of friends. And most students in those circle of friends have someone that abuses some type of drug. And from time to time, I tell the students, it is very possible they are going to find themselves in a situation where that friend is trying to get them to partake with them. The advantage of joining the Drug-Free Clubs of America, I've told them, is it's very simple to tell that friend, I could be randomly drug tested tomorrow. I never know when it's going to happen. There is no way I can do that. And by doing that, they can maintain that friendship and remove themselves out of that situation and eliminate the peer pressure component entirely just with that simple word. This is our 4th year. We have grown every year. Last year we had 336 students in the club. That's over 60% of our student body. This year we have not taken our initial drug test. It is this month. I can tell you right now we are right at 50% of our student body that has turned in applications to join that. One of the other requirements of the club is that, as I already mentioned, the school cannot be aware of the results. Therefore, school personnel cannot administer the drug test. This year at the Ashtabula County Medical Center is sending nurses out voluntarily to our school to conduct those drug tests for them. So we can only run a program with the Drug-Free Clubs of America with partnerships of business and industry within Ashtabula County, and we're certainly grateful that they are helping us with that. Thank you.
Last, I have the honor of introducing Judge Gary Yost, who actually handles our drug court here in the county. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Commissioner Whittington for the invitation to be here. And of course, thank you to all of you for being interested enough to spend an evening like this listening to all of us talk about what obviously is a monstrous problem. I don't know how else really to describe it. It's obviously a multifaceted problem, and it's going to, I think, require a multifaceted approach. You've heard a lot of ideas already here tonight. I wish I could say I had a solution. I don't have a solution, but I do have some knowledge about what the court system is trying to do to address the problem. And in this idea of dealing with this problem, how it really came about is a recognition by the courts that if you have a person who is an addict, if you don't do anything to try to treat the addiction, it's very difficult then to change their behavior. So people who are addicts commit crimes. If we lock them up in prison, if we don't ever do anything again to try to address the addiction, then sooner or later they're going to come back out of prison, and they're probably just going to go back to the same behavior that got them into the problem in the first place. So some visionary judge, I guess down in Miami, Florida back in 1989 came up with this idea of a drug court concept, which I affectionately think of as the social worker judge concept. And then in 1995, the first drug court was started in Hamilton County, Ohio. And in 2008, Judge Mackey here in Ashtabula County started the first drug court here in Ashtabula County. It's an approach, it's a way to try to deal with people who we recognize do suffer from addiction, and to try to get them together with treatment. Now, I've really come to appreciate the value of treatment. I believe that treatment really does work. I've seen it work in the drug court context, but I know some people have already given their view on issue one. And I guess I'm going to ask you to think about this, because if it was easy to get people into treatment, the Sheriff's Department wouldn't be having all these problems. Mr. Iarocci wouldn't be filing all these indictments. If we could just tell people, look, you need to get into treatment and take care of your problems, if it was that easy, we wouldn't have the situation that we have today. So what we have attempted to do, at least on the court's end, our piece of this as people come through the criminal justice system, is to try to take persons who meet certain criteria required for the program and force them into treatment. Now, as they say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. That may be true, but I think if you talk to people who've been in the drug court program, even though they sometimes come in kicking and screaming, if we can get them sober to start with, and if we can begin to teach them skills that they can use to be able to address addiction and to be able to move forward on a path of recovery, a large number of these people begin to really appreciate the value of what they're getting out of this, and they will begin to have a more positive attitude and a more positive approach toward the value of treatment for them. Now, the thing about drug court, and the unfortunate problem with it, is you have to commit a crime to get there. You can't, if you have a relative or a friend who you think needs treatment, you can't just sign them up for the drug court, because we believe we've had pretty good results, which I will pat myself on the back a little bit here. We've been showing overall a success rate of about 75% here in Ashtabula County. That's just a little higher than what the national average is, but it's on par with the success that drug courts have been able to achieve. 75% means they have not reoffended. As we track them through the years, that probably in the range of about 25% have reoffended. The great majority of people reoffend within the first year after they finish the program. If they can get through the first year, they've got a much better chance of long-term success. Then we have some more within the second year. And if we can get them past 2 years, there's actually very little reoffending after we get people past that 2-year mark. So first of all, you have to commit a crime to get into the program. But not everybody who commits a crime gets into the program. It's actually designed to deal with the most high-risk, high-needs offenders. So a person who wants to come into the program has to be screened. There's questionnaires that have been evidence-based things that have been set up. I'm not the expert on that. I have treatment people who do that for me. But an assessment is done in which a determination is made that a person is at a very high risk of committing more crimes if there's not an intervention that includes treatment, and the person also has high needs, which basically means they're an addict. They're not an occasional user or a so-called recreational user. They're somebody who has a really serious drug problem. So in the drug court, we're dealing with the most difficult cases. We're taking the people that are most likely to go out tomorrow and commit another crime, and we're hauling them into this program, and we're using the resources that we have here locally in our community to get them into treatment. I'll take a moment here to thank the sheriff, and I know Lieutenant Kimberly, who's sitting over there, serves on our advisory committee for the court, is in charge of the jail. They have really bent over backwards in spite of the overcrowding situation in the jail to help us to use jail incentives. Because, or I should have said deterrence. Incentives we give people too when they do good things. Deterrence is what we do to them when they do bad things. But they've worked really to make the jail available. If we need to put somebody in right now for 1 or 2 days or 5 days, they make it work for us, and that's very important to the success of the system for the court to have those kind of resources available. I knew that I was really going to run out of time, so I guess what I would really like to do, just in finishing up, is to let you know that this approach that the court system is trying to use, in my opinion, is about the best thing we've been able to find so far in trying to address the problem of addiction. And it has been recognized, and we've been trying to replicate it throughout the county, and we now have a mental health court. Judge Cezanne has started a health court at the common police court level. The mental health court obviously deals with persons who have primarily mental health issues. The Ashtabula Municipal Court has developed a drug court at the municipal court level. I think it's called the Recovery Court. Judge DiGiacomo presides over that court. And Judge Camplese did mention it to you when he was standing up here. But in the juvenile court, he's developed a family drug court program that he has had up and running in the past year. So there's a recognition that this model is something that is working, and the judges here in Ashtabula County are making a great effort to do our part in the role that we play within the criminal justice system to help to try to do something to deal with this problem. I think I should probably just be quiet for now. Is there going to be a question time that you're going to allow for people? So again, thank you very much.
Could we give them a round of applause? I would like to personally thank each and every one of you for coming out tonight and entertaining me with doing this and being part of this panel. At this point, I'd like to open it for question and answers. So if anybody has any questions, we're going to take one of the portable mics and bring it down for you to ask any questions of anybody up on the panel. Okay, now nobody rush and
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, questions?
Okay. I'm Larry Lister. I'm the zoning inspector from Harpersville. One question, I don't know if there's anything you can do about it, but you say you have a lot of people coming from, say, Cuyahoga County to sell their drugs and stuff like that. Is there any way, if they're convicted, that they can be served jail time in their own county instead of Ashtabula County? You know.
Yeah. If the crime's committed here, the sentence has to be served here. But if it's a crime where the sentence involves prison, then they're on their way to a state prison or a state facility. So, but if the sentence is local incarceration, the incarceration has to be served here in Ashtabula County.
Just as a counterpoint and to explain the difference between the adult system and the juvenile system, if you are a juvenile and you engage in the same behavior that would be a felony, just as you described if an adult did it, I would do an adjudication as the juvenile judge, and to answer your question, they would have to go back to their home county for disposition, which means the home county in the juvenile realm would be responsible for the incarceration expense of that child. So it's a little bit different.
Any other questions?
There was several people up there that talked about a jail. To what extent and how many beds would you be talking?
Well, I'd like to introduce Lieutenant Kimmerly, our jail administrator.
Thank you. About 2 years ago, the county hired a firm called Strollo Architects to come in and do a needs assessment in Ashtabula County. While that needs assessment has been completed, it's still in the draft form. However, I can tell you that that's pointing toward 300 beds. I'm afraid to make it squeak.
Any other questions?
All the way on the other side.
That's a good question. He asked if that's for treatment or incarceration or both, and I would answer both. As has been touched on by several members of the panel, treatment is a huge component of getting ourselves out of this problem. And I don't want to violate the 3 to 5 minute rule, but I feel like about 15 years ago, the dynamics seem to have changed. I saw it take place first in the schools, where parents used to send their children to school to be educated. However, at some point, they started sending the children there, and the schools were expected to fix behavioral issues, teach manners, things like that normally took place in the home. And I feel like that same dynamic is now taking place in the criminal justice system, where we're seeing people come into the criminal justice system with health issues, mental health issues, addiction problems, lack of education, things like that. So now the criminal justice system is burdened with fixing these problems, which I think we can do given the tools to do it if that's what society expects of us. So yes, a big part of that 300-bed jail will involve treatment, will involve mental health, it will involve classroom space to be able to have things like job training, as Mr. Meyer spoke on, to be able to have GED programs, parenting classes, things like that that need to take place to get ourselves out of this issue.
Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Tammy Pentek. I'm the clerk for the courts. I do see firsthand the numbers have increased over the years. My question is what questions the panel has to the trustees and the townships. What would you request, and what would you like to see from the townships to help and aid in you, for you?
Does anybody want to answer that?
Is this on? Coming from a prevention standpoint specifically, obviously, we need a lot more grassroots efforts in this county. We have, for instance, Red Ribbon Week is next week. And I used the example of Elevation earlier in Kanya. On Saturday, the city of Kanya is coming together to hang red ribbons in town. Conneaut Police Department is having their National DEA Take Back Day on Saturday, October 27th. So Elevation is helping get word out about that. It's these simple little things to have kind of a unified front, a unified effort in the towns to it should just basically expand prevention messaging and efforts. And it's not always complicated, it's kind of simple stuff, but it's letting your area know that you're not going to stand for this anymore, that we need to step up and have a unified front and do something about this.
And, you know, I was asked today to kind of present the doom and gloom, and as I sat down and listened to all of these messages of hope and accomplishment that the other speakers brought, I don't want to leave you with the idea that as a system, our juvenile court is not seeking to change the status quo. My goal is, as elected officials, is to sensitize you to at least an observation that I made years ago, that we need systemic change in the sense that we, at the middle layer of that justice system, I believe is key. Because if we're successful in our juvenile court, and we have a family drug court, we have gone all in developing what is a completely novel way of dealing with juvenile issues in developing our juvenile resource center, where we're all in on intervention, identifying the problem, using screening tools that were alluded to. We do up to 8, and then we address it and we get out. Just like you would if you were a parent. You redirect, and then you let the child internalize, and then if you have to do it again, you do it again, but you don't use that tool of incarceration to do it. My concern is that if we do our job well, statistics tell us that I'm going to turn 85% of those kids, if we did nothing, will figure out it's not right to hit people, it's not right to steal people's stuff, it's not right to tip over gravestones. So that leaves us with the 15% that theoretically our juvenile system should be using. If we're 50% successful, I'm delivering 7% of that juvenile population to the adult system. Now, if our current systems work so well, then why are our jails so full? Part of it is that we're dealing with a new animal. It is behavior that is driven by an addiction. So, you know, first, there's a systemic component to this. Secondly, we have all kinds of messages of hope here in the county that we are developing these systems, and Kaitie's message of community is the key. I'm confident, just like I alluded to, all these social problems that I saw in my career that involved drugs, we solved. We, by and large, found the solutions. I'm confident we're going to find this solution. But as township trustees, you know, I would urge you that you spread the message at every level. In a county such as ours, we need some help from other outside sources. And it's coming. It is coming.
My comment would be just to recognize that this isn't just a social issue. This is an economic issue as well. And the health of your communities, your townships, fiscally depends in part on our ability to effectively address these types of challenges.
Making it squeak now.
Do we have any other questions?
Hi, I'm Michael Cliff. I'm Township Trustee for Kingsville, but I also own a local business. And as you touched on with Growth Partnership, is the labor shortage is there. And one thing that we do a lot of hires coming out of the LARC program or Second Chance programs. And I'm really looking for some suggestions or ideas, resources out there. And what I'm finding is we'll hire people, they'll come to us, we're a drug-free workplace, they'll pass their pre-employment drug screens, they'll start working, they're great employees, but then what happens is about a month into it, maybe 2 months, we start having issues where they're showing up late, calling off work, and they just go on this downhill spiral. And what I'm to assume is that they get out, they get back around their normal friends, they get pockets full of money because they're working, and then they just go right back downhill. So then we're constantly having turnovers because we're left to say, well, we're sorry, we can't have you here. So I'm kind of looking for some suggestions, ideas of when we have those things happening, and they're happening over and over now, what resources are out there that employers may be able to look for, or ideas to try to get them back on board, because we do need workers in the workplace, and unfortunately it's just pushing them all to the side.
I guess I'll take a stab at that. And part of the, we see that challenge at really every level. So small business and within large business. And the one thing I'm glad you brought that up is that it's particularly challenging for smaller businesses because you're wearing all the hats, right? You're the fiscal officer, you're the human resource officer, you're the CEO, you're the purchasing agent, all the way to the janitor. Right, and so it becomes very challenging for smaller companies to deal with these issues. I think to the extent that, and maybe some of the other panelists can talk about some of the treatment programs, but one of the things that we're trying to do is make sure that our business community is connected with those social service programs that address treatment. Making sure that that good employee can get the treatment that they need to get back to being a good employee, rather than just completely disconnecting with them and saying, I wish you the best, and if you get straightened out, come back and see me. But recognizing that the ability to move through treatment and know that there is the opportunity to come back to that employment position, I think is a value add in their success. So there are a number of programs, and I would encourage you, we can speak afterwards to try to direct you to some of those support resources for employers to assist employees dealing with addiction.
So we recognized in that YO program that one of the key components is exactly what you're talking about. So the youth that emerge out of our program, even though we could claim a success for our performance measures and exit them as soon as we place them with an employer like you, we follow up with them for a year, and their case manager keeps working with them for precisely that reason, because we recognize that, you know, those temptations are still there, and they get that money in their pocket, and they might go back to their old ways. There are, you know, concepts out there, so that's what we're doing in that current program. But Geauga Growth, working with their United Way in Geauga County, started a couple of years ago a program they call Bridges. And they started that with grant dollars. It's now supported by employers, but the whole concept there is to the employers that participate have a case manager who they rely upon, who basically works as a liaison for the incumbent workers of companies, so that when they recognize that there's a problem, an issue, maybe it's drugs or maybe it's daycare or lack of transportation to work, they then work with as a liaison to put them in touch with the resources in the community to help them out. And it's an interesting model that we've been talking about for some time that we may have to explore in the future. But the whole focus is we recognize that you make a commitment and an investment in those employees, and when you lose them, there goes all that training, and so that's an interesting concept that I think one case manager supporting about 6 or 7 large-size employers, and it's had some mixed results, but it's showing some promise.
First of all, I want to commend you for hiring people that are coming, you know, out of a program such as ours. But just one important point: at the time they come out of that program, they're probably the most highly motivated, the most clear thinking they've been in a while. And I would suggest to all the employers out there that if you're inclined to hire people and lend a hand to them at that point in time, that you use the leverage as an employer that this is the rule. I'm willing to hire you and take a risk with you, but I am also going to require, as a matter of your employment contract, that you do this, this, and this, and that you verify with me. And I think there's more of a sense of partnership and a building towards a solution. Plus, you're kind of speaking the language that our programs use. You're demanding accountability. So it was interesting that you posed your question the way you did, because there's an opportunity to partner with that person in their sobriety. And I thank you for doing that.
Thank you. We're going to take one more question.
I have 2 questions for Judge Camplese. Sorry, am I too loud? No. I'm Tina Newton. I have custody of my niece due to the drug epidemic. Unfortunately affected both my brother and his estranged wife. So I'm in this situation. I see that you have, you had stated while you were on speaker that you had 51 permanent custody cases. And we understand that the drug epidemic a lot of times starts with prescription drugs. But in addition to that, I also understand that it's also due to people that don't seek mental health help as well. And then just to expand on that, as I'm seeing with my nieces, she's only 3 years old and has already experienced post-traumatic stress disorder. So what do you have in place? I know you had mentioned that you're developing systems for children, and is there any type of system in place for those children to deal with those issues as well? And the second question is, can I have a few minutes after everything's over? Thank you.
Here we're talking about an intersection between what we've initiated with our Juvenile Resource Center. The reason we've called it a resource center as opposed to a juvenile diversion center is we're trying to gear it towards a resource for families. You know, we could call it a family and juvenile resource center. So the intersection between what you're talking about and the juvenile justice system would be your child is experiencing some behavior that is of concern to you. Perhaps it's not rising to the level of criminogenic behavior, but let's say they're leaving the house or they're doing things to other children. Our resource center exists as a kind of a gateway to other resources. So by doing our assessments, we screen for trauma, the ACEs we do. We screen for things such as sexual human trafficking and a whole spectrum of mental health and substance abuse screening tools. And then we can then put you in touch with the service that you need. Now we're not taking the place of a mental health board or a Signature Health or a Tri-C or a LARC. What we're doing is we're trying to put our finger on the problem and point you in the direction. So you don't necessarily have to have a criminal problem or a delinquency problem or an unruly problem to bring your child in. That child is fairly young, so I mean they're not even going to be on our, we don't even have a reliable screening tool to use because, you know, theoretically we're not even concerning ourselves with that behavior until the child's maybe age 11. You know, prior to that it's you know, something that should be dealt with by a different system other than the juvenile justice system. So I'd be happy to talk with you. There's people in this room that you could be put in touch with that would be of assistance to you. So thank you.
Okay, so I lied, and we have one more question, and then we're going to end the evening.
I know in some cases we use pharmaceuticals to treat opioid addiction, Vivitrol. Some of them are opiate-based, like Suboxone. Would any of you be supportive of adding medical marijuana to the list of exit drugs?
Hi, Greg. How are you? You want to answer that?
What the rush is to legalize, whether it's medicinal and definitely not recreational. I think we need to take a step back and see the successes and failures of places that have already made the mistake, because in 10 years we're going to be regretting it. Every day, I'm going to say this, Chris is back here laughing at me. Every day I turn on the television and I see anti-tobacco commercials. But every day we have politicians that are encouraging marijuana use by legalizing it. And by legalizing it, we're encouraging it. We're saying there's nothing wrong with it. So what message are we sending to our children? So that's all I'm going to say.
I'm no medical expert, but until the studies prove that medical marijuana is truly a medically assisted treatment, in other words, a drug that could assist somebody to get off of the opiates, I'm adamantly opposed to it.
Okay, and this is, I just have a minute, but I just want to address real quickly from the drug guy's point of view, issue 1. I think part of it, Ashtabula County, we are in somewhat of a unique situation. I spoke earlier about how many people from Cuyahoga County come here and sell drugs. Drug traffickers and drug users are historically transient people. Okay, we're right on the Pennsylvania state line. If Ohio weakens our laws, we're not only going to get the people we have here, but if you're a drug dealer over in Western Pennsylvania and your customers don't have the consequences that they may have in the state of Pennsylvania, I feel we're going to acquire drug traffickers from Pennsylvania. Okay, because what this will do to us as drug investigators is this will cripple the way we do our job. There will be no initiative or no incentive for people to assist us in going out to get the dealers if all they're facing is a misdemeanor. Judge Yost spoke of drug court. It will cripple the ability of drug courts in the state of Ohio. There just is, and I think the thing that you got to think about the most, that this is a constitutional amendment. So if we vote this in and it's a giant disaster, the legislature can't do anything about it. We're stuck with the disaster until we put it on the ballot again. And the people that are pushing this are doing this in a constitutional amendment for that purpose. They don't want our legislators to have a say. The people that are pushing this are not from the state of Ohio. Because if I challenge any of you in this room, go online and see what groups are against issue 1. I'm still trying to find a legitimate group that is in favor of it. Yesterday or last night, the Trumbull County Mental Health and Recovery Board voted to not support it. The judges, the county commissioners of the state of Ohio, the sheriffs, the police chiefs, there isn't anybody for this. It's just a bad amendment. We need to come up with better ways. If we pass this amendment, basically we're rewarding people for bad behavior as far as I'm concerned. People should have to prove or at least accomplish something to get a reward. And if you pass issue 1, that won't happen. Okay, there are things, people who have a drug problem get arrested on a felony, there are ways of, if they go through treatment and they accomplish something over a period of time, then we need to reward them for their accomplishment. But we can't start rewarding people and they haven't even accomplished anything yet. So, like I said, go online and read up on it. It is just a bad amendment.
On a note about issue 1, on Tuesday, the Ashtabula County Commissioners passed a resolution opposing issue 1. There will be a joint press conference Monday at noon with our Ashtabula County Prosecutor and our County Sheriff. So we are opposed of it, and we feel the burden that will come from issue 1 will only affect the taxpayers of this county. It will become your burden. At this time, I'd like to close. I know we ran late tonight, but we had such great speakers and such great information. As you can see, we have made great progress. I hope that the conversation we have had today was beneficial and will inspire future actions to continue as we tackle the drug epidemic in our community. Thank you and have a great night.